The first sculpture is called Neptune Fountain and is located on the grounds of Snug Harbor Cultural Center, which is the north shore of Staten Island. The Snug Harbor Cultural Center was at one time a home for retired sailors. Therefore, it is only fitting that there be a sculpture of Neptune, the Roman god of the sea, on the grounds of Snug Harbor. The sculpture sits in the middle of a fountain, on the edge of the grounds. It depicts Neptune sitting on a serpent with his trident in hand, ready to strike whatever is below the surface of the water. The sculpture radiates the power of Neptune, but it also gives off a feeling of fear for the unknown creatures beneath the surface. The original sculpture was designed by Quenwell Rothschild Associates and cast by John W. Fisk Ironworks in 1892. It was made out of zinc and painted bronze, as this was cheaper than cast iron. Over time, the sculpture was deteriorated, and Neptune eventually lost his hands, an arm, and a foot. The Modern Art Foundry in Queens recasted the sculpture in 1994 and replaced the original in the fountain. The new sculpture is also made out of zinc and painted bronze. The original sculpture can be found in Snug Harbor's Welcome Center. The second sculpture, which is directly across from the sculpture of Neptune, is perhaps one of the most beloved sculptures on the grounds of the Snug Harbor Cultural Center. Francis the Praying Mantis is an 18-foot long, 12-foot high, 2,500-pound sculpture in front of the Children's Museum, which houses an insect exhibit. As the name suggests, this fun and whimsical sculpture is an enormous praying mantis. The original Francis sculpture was crafted in 1991, made out of wood and painted over. After a particularly bad storm, with heavy rains and high winds, along with damage due to an insect infestation, Francis unfortunately fell apart in 2010. Staten Island artist Lenny Price redesigned Francis and built a new sculpture out of sheet metal, stainless steel, muffler pipes, and other metal objects. The incredibly realistic eyes are made from catalytic converters. The color of Francis the Praying Mantis is green, which many elementary school children related to the subject of science. When I was in elementary school, we would put green stickers on our science books. So, whenever our teacher would tell us that it was time for science class, I would immediately pull out the book with the green sticker. When viewing the sculpture after many years, I was brought back to memories of elementary school. I remember when I first saw the giant green praying mantis, I was in awe of how big it was, but also scared and fearful because I was not fond of insects at that point in my life. The form and color of the sculpture is an effort to engage children in the field of science. Despite it being an insect, Francis, the praying mantis, is definitely one of the favorite sculptures among the children at Snug Harbor. This is a statue of Confucius, who lived from 551 to 479 BC. He was one of the world's most renowned philosophers, alongside Gandhi. The statue is located in Chinatown, Manhattan, directly in the Confucius Plaza near Chapman Square. The statue is made of either copper or bronze, and its pedestal seems to be made of marble. One of Confucius's work, the chapter of Great Harmony, is written on front of the pedestal, which means that the sculptor meant to bring Confucius's words of wisdom to the viewer's focus first. The right face of the pedestal shows that the statue is a generous donation from the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association to the city of New York in commemoration of the 200th birthday of the United States of America in 1976. On the back of the pedestal, the quote, "The world is a commonwealth," means that the world itself is full of riches. It is etched in both Chinese and English in order to cater to the Chinese American population in Manhattan. From this quote, one can take that Confucius is a man of few worldly possessions, and rather someone who focused on a life of modesty and spiritualism. Ironically, the sculptor depicts Confucius wearing an elaborate robe flowing with many layers like a waterfall, as evident if you look at his many sleeves. Now, I say depict, because there was no exact picture to what he looked like, only clues through paintings and stories throughout the generations. His face is very serious, as shown on his brows, yet calmed and reserved, for he is a strong advocate of peace and nonviolence, even as far as to denounce the use of forks and knives that were said to be a symbol of violence. Confucius's figure is upright, with his hands grasped together as if he were in a deep thought, possibly giving advice to a king or some noble figure. Aside from his philosophies, I wonder what his demeanor was. Was he an approachable person? Did he predict that this saying and virtues would become such an influential focus to not only the great empire of China, but to a whole world of generations to come? Has he been a man of wisdom? What experiences did he have that led him to gain such an incredible insight? Perhaps a loss of a loved one or a difficult childhood? Were there any philosophers before him that had an influence on him, that set a precedent? From the artist's depiction, Confucius looks like a man with many stories and experiences, like many elderly citizens, who would be more than willing to share with his children, grandchildren, and the rest of the world. Keith Haring was an internationally recognized artist of the 20th century. Haring's whole life revolved around his artwork, and from a young age, he knew that art is what he wanted to do. He was openly gay, and unfortunately, his career was cut short when he died from AIDS at the age of 31 in 1990. Despite this tragedy, much of his work still lives on and is remembered. He enjoyed working with simple, outlined subjects, some of which included dancing figures, barking dogs, and crawling babies. In 1985, Haring began to make three-dimensional objects in bold primary colors. The figures were constructed in a metal has two-dimensional cutouts, similar to that of his style of drawing, and were then assembled like paper dolls to create a three-dimensional object. Two of his creations are featured in Manhattan, in the financial district in front of 17 State Street, across from Battery Park. Both of these sculptures arise from the same collection, and they are named Untitled Figure Balancing on a Dog and Untitled Two Dancing Figures. The former was made in 1986 from steel, and the later was made in 1989 of aluminum. Untitled Figure Balancing on a Dog has resided in front of a building for a while Untitled Two Dancing Figures were placed after a major renovation of 17th State Street. The fact that both these sculptures are brightly colored makes them stand out against the bleak and gray financial setting from which it is placed, offering an alternative for the eye to follow. Herring, in fact, colored two of these sculptures so that they would remind viewers of childhood toys. Both exemplify the central role of dance and movement for Herring's iconography and practice. Herring himself described his desire for his sculptures to have the atmosphere of a wild playground, and these two works definitely conformed to his wishes. These sculptures were in fact part of a set of three. Below his signature, Untitled Two Dancing Figures, held the inscription 2/3, and Untitled Figure Balancing on a Dog was labeled 3 out of 3. 1 out of 3, named Untitled Three Figures Dancing, is currently on a public display in San Francisco, California. Herring wished to reach a kind of immortality through his works, and he believed his sculptures would be the best way for him to be recognized, because he believed sculptures had an appeal that a painting does not possess, for a sculpture has permanent and real feelings about it. The final sculpture is called the Charging Bull. The Charging Bull is one of the most well-known sculptures in New York City. It starred in films such as Hitch, The Other Guy, and The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and is even said to be as famous as the Statue of Liberty. People from all around the world flock to Manhattan's financial district in order to photograph themselves with the bull. They all wish to participate in an unusual ritual where they visit the sculpture, first rubbing the bull's horns, then its nose, and then they finish by rubbing an unmentionable part of its anatomy, hoping that they will be lucky as a result. No one truly understands why this bull holds such an appeal, and it is certain that Arturo de Modico never thought that his sculpture would gain such a following. After the 1987 stock market crash, de Modica wished to re-energize the American people with an image of a bull, hoping that it would become a symbol of strength and power. $360,000 later, de Modica installed his bull in the city by a Christmas tree, and instantly people were attracted to the sculpture. Hundreds of people exchanged Christmas presents around it, and de Modica walked among them, handing out flyers that explained the meaning behind his sculpture. The police soon impounded the bull, for it did not have a permit. However, a public outcry was launched, headed by the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, and it was decided that the bull would be installed permanently 2 blocks south of the Exchange Building in the plaza at Bowling Green. This sculpture became a permanent representation of aggressive financial optimism and prosperity. The bull is leaning on of his haunches, as if ready to charge, ready to take on anything that gets in its way. The bronze color and the hard metallic texture emphasizes the brute force of this creature. This bull is just one of 5 that Demotica made. When he put the other 4 up for sale, Demotico hoped that the other 4 would be placed in cities all around the world. 2 eventually were sold, and now one resides in Shanghai and the other one in Amsterdam.